Hey everyone, welcome to Gaijin Sake. My name is Arturo Ureña Hamilitz. I'm a long-term immigrant in Japan, moved here in 1999, married, kids, business, trying entrepreneurial projects, and a million other things. I'm just going to jump right into it because this is the first episode of this podcast, so I'm not sure how it's going to go, but I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I enjoy talking about Japan, my adopted home country. Japan, for me, is a life unexpected. I was sitting with my Japanese wife the other day at a Starbucks, and I was just thinking about really how fast time flies. It's like 1 minute to the next, and it's 25 years. Actually, I'm going on my 26th year here in Japan. I grew up in South San Diego in the 70s, Mexican-American family. My mother moved to the United States, and in our house, we never even spoke English so much as I did when I was at school. I never thought I would leave San Diego, much less move to Tokyo, Japan, and spend most of my adult life here. I remember arriving in Tokyo during the rainy season in 1999. And guys, it was surreal, hot, humid, and completely foreign. I couldn't even say hello or thank you. I had no sense of one or two words in Japanese. Looking back, my time in Japan has transformed my identity and worldview. Who I am today is a product of my adult life and the time I've spent here in Japan. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you on a journey so that you guys can learn the ins and outs of Japan through my eyes. Did I mention that I also went to Waseda University and have a strong background in contemporary Japanese culture? That's going to come into play a lot of times, but I'm going to keep this really informal and fun because I don't want this to be overheated, stressed, or, one of those podcasts where people are just bashing. I'm not going to bash. I'm going to say the good, the bad, and the ugly because after 25 years, I've come to terms that I'm not Japanese. I'm a Gaijin. That doesn't mean bad necessarily. What it means is even for Japanese people to be Japanese, there's so much social pressure that I'm a foreigner living in Japan. But through these podcasts, I hope to share with you how I feel I became part of Japan, although I can never be Japanese. And I'll explain that more and more through different podcasts. And I think you guys will get a kick out of how humorous it can be to live here as a foreigner in Japan for so many years. People will often ask me when I first came to Japan, why did you come to Japan? And the truth is, I actually never really planned to come to Japan. I ended up here because I'd actually spent a couple of years in South Korea, and I had a great time. I really loved the culture. There was a lot of stress at the time in my life and also economically in Korea. So there was still a lot of animosity and social unrest. I'll actually probably flip back and forth some of those experiences to share with you so you guys can see how that kind of also helped to form my worldview and how I do things and how I see things. So, 26 years later, Japan isn't just where I live. Japan is my home. I always say in Japanese, 私は日本人じゃないけど日本のもの, which roughly translates to say, I'm not Japanese, but I belong to Japan. It's interesting because I don't care if someone ever tells you, guys, if someone ever tells you they fit in, they're accepted by Japanese, guys, there's different levels of acceptance. You will never be Japanese coming here. You can, though, be an immigrant who moved to Japan and become part of Japanese society, even though you will never be Japanese. And I'll explain that as we go through this podcast so that you guys can really get a better understanding of what it's like. I think first I need to give you a little bit of background. This is not to confuse people with what I do. But I came to Capoeira to teach Afro-Brazilian culture and Capoeira, which is a Brazilian martial art. In 1999, I completed all my master's coursework in a Latin American Studies degree at San Diego State. Heavy focus, cultural anthropology. 2011, I earned my master's in international relations here from Waseda University, one of their top universities. Just think about it as an Ivy League school in Japan. And my focus was cultural adaptation and how traditions evolve in Japan in comparison to globalization of culture and importing foreign culture. So before I was even able to start writing my thesis, my professor, who was a fantastic mentor, you have to become an expert in contemporary Japanese society, or how can you write about contemporary Japanese society? So a couple of years, I really read a lot, and she really put a lot of positive pressure on me. And I'm going to give her a big shout out. Dr. Roberts, you were a fantastic teacher. You're an icon. And I'm glad that you finally retired because you deserve it. I loved your class and all the times that we had a chance to talk. After that, after being in Japan for 25 years, I want to tell you guys a little bit about when I first came to Japan. I was only going to stay here for a year or two. But as fate would have it, I met my beautiful wife and everything changed. In 2003, we opened Tokyo's first full-time capoeira academy. Today, we're running a thriving school with about 80 kids, and it constantly gives me a chance to have deep insights and see how it's almost like I'm doing a research paper every day, every time I talk to people at this level in Japan. Lots of moms, lots of dads, lots of kids. And I've also seen a lot of kids grow over the last 25 years. So let me share a little bit with you what the reality of being a foreigner in Japan is. Like I said, when I first came to Japan, people would tell me, well, when are you leaving Japan? And this question is actually incredibly shaped by Japanese cultural norms and values. Japan does not naturally integrate outsiders. And let me explain this. Long-term foreigners are often seen as temporary guests. When we come here, we have this concept, for example, being American, whether it's true or not, we have a concept of like Ellis Island. My grandfather and grandmother came from Poland, and they came through Ellis Island. My mom immigrated from Mexico. So America has this concept of immigration. Japan doesn't. But a lot's changed, and although it's not like public common knowledge, Japan is changing. It is becoming more and more immigrant friendly. And I'll just tell you, from my opinion, what I've seen, and also from what I've researched and things that I've heard from people who actually research and are part of this kind of conversation. So putting it in perspective, in 1999, foreign residents made up 1.7 of Japan's population. Yeah, 1.7. But be careful. Most of those are Chinese, second, third generation Chinese, Korean, and generally Asian backgrounds, okay? So Japan has a very unique population understanding, okay? If you come and you have any Japanese blood in you, you can, up to the third generation, you can apply for a Japanese descent visa. That's how a lot of the Brazilians and Peruvians and a lot of people came, because they had access to that. But as I was saying, 1.7% of Japan's population, most of it would be, I would say 80% of it would be of Asian descent. So Chinese, Korean, now we have a lot of Vietnamese, Thai, Filipino, and more and more. So To see someone who was actually like Caucasian or African was very rare. I remember walking through the streets of Shibuya, the very famous, a lot of people know it as Scramble Crossing. There's a very famous building called Ichimaru-kyu. It's 109, and I used to do capoeira games out there when they closed the roads on Sundays. But the important thing was that we would walk by, and there was a couple of other teachers who were teaching English at the time that were friends of mine. But it was really, guys, it was surreal compared to now. When you would walk through Shibuya, if you saw another Caucasian or another person who was African American or non-Asian walking in Shibuya, I'd spend my whole weekend there for like the first year and a half when I was here, and I almost never ran into someone I didn't know. It was that few people of non-Asian descent working regularly in Shibuya. For example, you go to the local hub or whatever, that's where we used to hang out, and it's kind of like the foreigners bar, and it was always foreigners. And it was the same foreigners every weekend, and when you walk around, it's the same people walking around. Today, 2023, the numbers increased to 2.7, but still, Japan lags behind other countries when it comes to immigration. But this is where we need to be very careful. This is my opinion. Japan, in contrast to the United States is a country that has a culture of immigration, but it's not united. While Japan has a culture doesn't have a culture of immigration, but it works for immigrants to come here. If you know how to follow the Japanese system and you move to Japan, you can survive. So more and more, I'm seeing people at different levels, long-term living in Japan. When at first it was just, a few years, and that's why Japanese would always ask me, when are you leaving Japan? The reason was because they would say, foreigners come and foreigners leave. They don't have it in their mentality that Japan is a country for foreigners to come and immigrate to and live here forever, long term. Personally, I'm going to be here till the day I die. I've made my life here. This is where I am. I don't see myself moving outside of Japan. I see myself here with my family because here's everything that's important to me. But I've also realized how me being an immigrant in Japan affects me mentally, professionally, socially, and very importantly, psychologically. There's a lot of factors that affect long-term foreigners in Japan, and I'm going to be sharing a lot about that as we go through these podcasts. So, what do I want to share with you guys today? The most important thing I want to talk to you guys about today is why foreigners or Gaijin, I know some people think Gaijin is a bad word, but I don't consider it a bad word. Actually, now it gives me pride to be one because I know where I am and who I am in Japan and in Japanese society. So I'll use the word, but I don't mean it in a negative or derogatory way. The cultural challenges, and the concept of ie versus soto, or inside versus outside, is the most important cultural aspect I can think of in Japan on how Japanese deal with foreigners. But it's not just with foreigners, it's with each other. You're either inside and part of my close-knit, or you're outside. And I treat you completely different by Japanese culture because of that. So what's inside? Family, close friends, trusted coworkers. And I would add to that, these are things that are built over time. Japanese do not instantly say, oh, you're my friend. It takes time, and there's a lot of examples that I'll give in the future of how friendship works. I think the concept of friendship in Japan is so interesting, and I really want to share so that maybe people who are here long term can better understand and create the network of friends that is necessary anywhere so that you can survive and have a good emotional state and thrive as an immigrant in Japan. So I want to give you what the outside is, soto. Strangers, foreigners, those not part of the inner circle. People who don't logically belong. Now, because of the power and the strength and compression, Japanese culture is like the pressure you put on coal to make a diamond. It is so powerful, so intense, that the pressure creates a lot of stress on Japanese people themselves. And I'll explain this later. We're going to be talking about a lot of topics like why Japanese aren't having kids, Fritter, why that disappeared, the Me Too movement, why it didn't work here, suicide, everything, things that are important to mental health and social development. I'm going to be discussing a lot of times in these. And most of the time, I'm going to try to have a very light and friendly note. But sometimes things are very important and very serious. And I want to be able to be diplomatic, yet maintain integrity when I tell you guys about how I see things so that you can follow my thought pattern and better understand how it is to live in Japan long term. Okay? So early on, I was firmly in the soto category, just another foreigner passing through. Over time, what changed? I started building a family, a business, and this will give me a very unique place in Japanese society. Although I will never fully be considered a Japanese person, over time, I will be considered part of the landscape. I want to say community, but like the landscape, right? As I have a business here for over 20 years in the same place, I'm part of here. I've actually had a lot of Japanese who've grown up around here that I speak to say, oh, if you're not here, it would be strange. It's because it's like the neighborhood rice shop. It's been there for 3 generations. If it was gone, it would be strange. Not missed, because you're soto, but it would be strange. Hopefully people would miss me because I try to do my best to be friendly to everybody and positive. So I might not have what other people see as a similar opinion about Japan, but like I said, I love my life here in Japan. I love my family, friends, my community, especially the community I built. And if you don't have this access to this positive community, or if you're not developing, the pressure of living in Japan can be almost like a crazy pill. It can make you stressed. It can make you angry. And you will run into a lot of people who've been here for a long time who are incredibly negative and anti-Japanese. But they are part of the landscape because they've been here so long. So being here for a long time is also important to be part of the landscape, but also how you develop your life logically according to Japanese cultural norms and values. I want to tell you guys a story that kind of fits this point. When I first came to Japan, and my wife and I in 2003 opened our academia, it's in Tokyo. The area is called Magome, but it's about, let's say, 3, if you were thinking from Shibuya, because everybody knows Shibuya Station, Meguro Station, Shibuya Station, Ebisu Station, Meguro Station, Gotanda on the Yamanote line. Switch over to the subway, which is the Asakusa line, and go towards Nishimagome, which is in Togoshi, Nakanobu, then my station. It's about I'm about 20 minutes from Shibuya Station by the Yamanote line and Yasukusa line. So I'm really center, but the interesting about Japan is that, especially Tokyo, is that you can move over a couple of blocks. And like right here, we call it Ashitamachi, which is like an older town. The area I'm in is very residential. It's nothing like Shibuya or Shinjuku. It's nothing like Meguro. It's nothing like Tokyo Station, even though we are still in the center of Tokyo. So there's a lot of little pockets of very traditional, very local Japanese neighborhoods. And this is where I'm living now. And when I first came, there was an older German guy that I met. And I think he's been here probably since like maybe the late 60s to early 70s. And I want to talk about him because this will kind of give you an image of what it's like to be here for a long time and not being able to. He adapted, everyone adapts, but not being able to create the community that you need around you to be mentally stable and free of toxic behavior. So this guy, it's actually a very tragic story because I can understand how he went this route in Japan. He was probably around 65 when I first met him, 70 almost. And he taught German at I think one of the language schools. And he really struggled with loneliness, resentment, and what I want to say, cultural isolation. He was always alone when he was walking in the streets. I never saw him with anybody. My wife actually said he knew the daughter or one of the sons, I can't remember, it's an old story, that actually went to school with her older sister. And like, I guess eventually the mother and father separated, and the separated person was this German older guy. And this gave him a lot of resentment. I don't know where the resentment came from, but I've realized I made a lot of people in the last 25 years who have a lot of resentment towards their lives in Japan, although they don't leave or can't leave. And it's because they've built no community around them, or they haven't built a positive community around them. I know people who've been here for 40 years and only still live in a toxic community that they've created themselves or in. I'm not saying good or bad. I'm saying I can see why this would create a lot of resentment and cultural isolation. Because if you're very negative here, Japanese already have to deal with a lot of negativity as being part of Japanese culture. They don't want to have to deal with it if you're a foreigner. So if you're a very negative person about Japan or behaving in Japan, Japanese people generally who are stable don't want to deal with you. I hope that makes sense, because I'm going to be going through a lot of stories and a lot of reflections on so many things that I've seen here, because I was always out and about. I've traveled everywhere in Japan. One of the perks of being one of the first people of capoeira in Japan, I was able to travel with the Ministry of Education's Brazilian performance team. We went to like every school. We went to like every festival. We were doing like 50 shows for the first 10 years, like 50 shows a year. It was a lot. And we got a chance to travel, and I got a chance to discuss with a lot of people these kinds of topics, because I'm always curious about Japanese culture, especially contemporary society. So, yeah, talking about this stuff really gets me going in a nostalgic way. So, how can I, bring this to this episode to a close because there's still so much I want to share. I think what I'll do for this first podcast, I'll give you guys what I'm going to continue talking about. I'm going to continue on this topic for the next podcast. So stay tuned because there's more stuff coming up. I'll be talking about living and working as a foreigner in Japanese society and why it's different than if you're an expat. It's different if you're military and you come here. It's different if you're in the embassy or something. If to live here is very different than if you come here, which is like an extended visa, because Japanese separate. If you're here as a tourist for like say a week, if you're here as a let's say 1 year college student, if you're here as a 2-year, 3-year college student, if you're here as an expat for a contract, Japanese still look at you as soto, outside. Because for them, there's no logic for them putting you in the inside because you're not. Because to be part of the inside in Japan, you have to be in Japan. But we'll get into that a lot more. This journey, this new Gaijin Sake podcast is dedicated to those who have shaped my life. Friends like Disco, TK, Ni-chan, Taka, Gus, and Keith, who have been with me, been my friends here, and have spent time here in Japan. My wife, to whom I promised, give me a chance and I'll love you forever. Here I am, 25 years later, married. My 3 children, who are my greatest inspiration. Everything I do for them. Guys, Japan is complex, fascinating place. I hope my experiences offer a meaningful perspective on living, working, and being a foreigner or an immigrant here in Japan for over 25 years. Thank you for joining me today. If you're interested in what I'm doing, I've got a lot of information coming up. Check out the comment section. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell if you're listening to this on YouTube. And if you're listening to this and you want to contribute to this experience, I also have my Mestre Vibes podcast, and that's available also on my Patreon page. And if you're interested in supporting this new project, getting early access, a lot of behind the scenes, I'm also going to be making travel videos, sharing Japan from an insider's perspective. Okay, guys, have a fantastic night. Don't forget to comment, and I hope to see you guys in the next episode. ありがとうございました。これから一緒に頑張りましょう。Thank you so much, and let's do our best together. Guys, have a fantastic day.